بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. أما بعد, then we continue this afternoon with our second lesson from the book ثلاثة الأصول, the three fundamental principles, by the great Imam Al-Allama Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab rahimahullah ta'ala. And we are reading primarily and predominantly from the explanation of Shaykh Salih ibn Fawzan al-Fawzan hafidhullah ta'ala, and we'll be using a number of other explanations as are relevant. We mentioned last week a number of explanations for the book Al-Usul al-Thalatha. They are the most important explanations of the book. Who remembers some of them? Abdurrahman ibn Qasim. Abdurrahman ibn Qasim, his explanation of Usul al-Thalatha can be al-Raqm al-Thani, and what is considered the first known explanations of Usul al-Thalatha. We could say that maybe what we can call number 2, the second known explanation of Usul al-Thalatha. Abdurrahman ibn Qasim, he was a contemporary with another scholar that we mentioned has the explanation of Usul al-Thalatha that is considered the first written explanation of Usul al-Thalatha, to the point that Abdurrahman ibn Qasim's explanation is technically the taqrirat, it is technically the class notes of his friend and his peer, who was the Grand Mufti of Saudi Arabia in his time. Was who? Shaykh Muhammad ibn Ibrahim al-Shaykh. Muhammad ibn Ibrahim al-Shaykh. So we'll be reading, inshallah ta'ala, in our explanation of Usul al-Thalatha from Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan, Shaykh ibn Baz, Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen, rahimahumullah ta'ala, as well as the Shaykh Abdurrahman ibn Qasim and the Shaykh Muhammad ibn Ibrahim. And those two explanations, the last two, are almost identical. There are slight differences between them, but they are almost identical because the notes of Muhammad ibn Ibrahim come from his lessons with a Shaykh Muhammad ibn Ibrahim. The notes of a Shaykh Abdurrahman ibn Qasim come from his sittings and in taking notes in the lessons of a Shaykh Muhammad ibn Ibrahim al-Shaykh, who was his close friend, and they were 1 year apart in age. And we said that Abdurrahman ibn Qasim, he is famous for a number of books or collections of the writings of other authors. Who remembers what Abdurrahman ibn Qasim collected? Majmu' al-Fatawa by Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala. There's a second book that was added to that is called Al-Mustadrak ala Majmu' al-Fatawa. And what he felt like he missed Al-Mustadrak, and he has a volume or two that he added to Majmu' al-Fatawa from other sources that he didn't have accessible to him, from the writings of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala. What else? From the writings of the ulama of Najd. Ad-Durar as-Saniyah, right? Which is a collection, a voluminous collection of the writings of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab and his children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and their students. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon them all. The author, he begins, the great scholar, Al-Allama, Shaykh al-Islam, Al-Mujaddid, the reviver, the reformer, Muhammad ibn Sulaiman al-Taymi, Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, rahimahullah ta'ala. He begins with I'alam, rahimakallah, after the Basmala, after saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Last week, to recap, we mentioned 3 general benefits for the Basmala. Why the Basmala is used at the beginning of writing a book or at the beginning of speech or the likes. And they are, firstly, for al-isti'ana. Yani the ba huna is the ba of al-isti'ana. We seek the assistance of Allah. We seek the assistance of Allah. Secondly, for ikhlas. For ikhlas, because when you say Bismillahi, there is something that is muqaddar mahdhuf. There is something that is implicit, that is understood, that has not been said, which is, in the name of Allah. If you are eating, I eat. In the name of Allah, I put on my clothing. In the name of Allah, I write. In the name of Allah, I recite the Quran. And so there is what is called taqdeem al-ma'mulat in the Arabic language, where you switch around the natural order of words. You switch around the natural order of words. Like when you say, Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'een, right? And when you say, Bismillah aktub, it says of aktub, Bismillah. Aktub, in the name of Allah, is like when you say, Iyaka na'budu. It says of na'budu iyak. Why do you say Iyaka na'budu as opposed to na'budu iyak, other than the fact that that's how it's in the Quran? What is the benefit and the meaning of saying it like that? You make it for hasr, yani munhasiran ala Allah. Allah alone we worship. Allah alone we worship. So the same is true with the basmala. Bismillah, and then there is something muqaddar mahdhuf, that is unspoken, that is understood, that comes after it. That comes after it, meaning in the name of Allah alone. So this is the third benefit, which is ikhlas. Ikhlas, or the second benefit rather, which is ikhlas. And that is the statement of sincerity. Is a statement of sincerity. The third is at-tabarruk, because you are following the way of the prophets, alayhim as-salatu was-salam, and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam specifically, in his rasail, and his communications and dispatches that he wrote to his military commanders, and he wrote to the rulers of the earth, calling them to Islam, that you are doing so for tabarruk, yani to get blessing, to invoke blessing in that which you are doing. And blessing the ulama of Islam, as was stated by Ibn Mandur, who wrote a book called, Ibn Mandur's book. Ibn Mandur, he wrote a lexicon in the Arabic language, probably the most famous, Lisan al-Arab. Lisan al-Arab. He says that al-baraka huwa al-khayru al-kathiru al-thabit. Al-barakatu hiya al-khayru al-kathiru al-thabit. Al-baraka, blessing. When a person wants blessing in something, what blessing means is khair, is goodness, that is kathir, that is copious and abundant. It is copious and abundant, and it is thabit, and it is stable, meaning it is irremovable. La yazul. And it is something da'im, is something that is constant and irremovable, abundant good. It is irremovable, abundant good. So a person, by invoking the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with sincerity, seeking the assistance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, engaging in beneficial learning, then they have begun with the most beautiful introduction. They have begun with the most beautiful introduction. The statement, I'alam rahimakallah. I'alam rahimakallah. Know, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon you. Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan, he says here, I'alam kalimatun tushiru ila al-ihtimam bil-mawdu'. The statement I'alam, know, K-N-O-W, know, have knowledge of, know, is a statement that indicates the importance of the topic at hand, the importance of the subject matter. And if you were to say no, and then you were to say something that was nonsense, then you would be hazard in your speech. You would be speaking nonsense. You would be speaking in a way that doesn't make sense. If you was to get the attention of somebody and say, listen, no, isma, i'alam, to the end of it, this is for tanbih. It's to get the attention of somebody because what you are saying is muhim. Because what you are saying is muhim. There is no doubt that what is about to be said is aham al-muhimmat. It is the most important thing that could ever be said. The most loved speech to Allah and the most loved speech to the Prophet ﷺ and to the believers is the kalima and la ilaha illallah, and that which is from the core of Islam, from the belief in Allah and the belief in the messengers and the belief and the spread of the religion itself. And so these subject matters, without a doubt, they are aham al-muhimmat, they are the most important of matters. So when a person says i'alam, فَمَعْنَاهُ أَنَ الْأَمْرَ الَّذِي سَيُلْقِهِ عَلَيْكَ أَمْرٌ مُهِمٌ. If a person says no, then this means that the matter that they are going to present to you is something of great importance and urgency. فهذه الكلمة تدل على أهمية الموضوع التي يبدأ بها فيه. And this statement, therefore, is indicative of the importance and the urgency of the subject matter that they are going to begin. معنى اعلم فعل أمر من العلم أي تعلم، والعلم هو إدراك شيء على ما هو عليه في الواقع أو تصور شيء على طبق الواقع أي المطابق للواقع. And knowledge is to understand something as it really is. Knowledge is to understand something as it really is. And those of us who are familiar with the explanation of Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen, rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions the 6 levels of madarik, yani the 6 levels of perception, and he ranging from knowledge to ignorance to doubt and so on and so forth. And you have knowledge and you have what is called ghalabatul dhann. You have knowledge and you have what is called ghalabatul dhann, which is near knowledge. It's not 100%, but it's more like 85, 90%, and above 60% that you are almost certain that this is the case. And knowledge is certainty, is that which is qat'i, and that which is certain, that which is certain. So have knowledge, and this knowledge that is mentioned here is fardun ayn, as we'll come to see inshallah ta'ala. What he is saying have knowledge about here is something that is fardun ayn. It is compulsory upon every single Muslim man and every single Muslim woman, young and old, male or female, young or old. It is mandatory upon every person. It's mandatory upon every person to know. And it is not something that, as we mentioned last week, a person can have taqleed as relates to. It's not something that a person can merely parrot what somebody else is saying. And this is clear from, we mentioned the hadith of Barra bin Azib, where the munafiq or the kafir will be asked in their grave the 3 questions, and they will say, ha la adri sami'tu an-nas yaquluna shay'an faqultu. The munafiq will say, I don't know, I heard people saying something and I merely said what they were saying. So it's mandatory for a person to have knowledge of what they are saying, that they know that this was the message of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they believe that it is the truth and that it must be complied with. And as we know, as we mentioned last week, there are a number of conditions for the shahada, and all of those conditions go back to believing the truth of what came to the Prophet ﷺ and complying with it, by worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered, and He through the prophets and the messengers. As for his statement, rahimakallah, may Allah have mercy upon you, Shaykh Salih Fawzan says, هذا دعاء لطالب العلم فالشيخ يدعو لطلبة العلم بأن يرحمهم الله وأن يلقي عليهم رحمته. Here, the author is making dua for the students of knowledge. The Shaykh, he is making dua for the students of knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mercy upon them, and that He casts His mercy upon them. Subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَهَذَا فِيهِ التَّلَطُّفُ مِنَ الْمُعَلِّمِ بِالْمُتَعَلِّمِ. And here we see the compassion and the kindness of the mu'allim, of the instructor and the teacher for the muta'allim, for the learner, for the student. وأنه يبدأ بالكلام الطيب والدعاء الصالح حتى يؤثر ذلك فيه. And that he should begin his speech with soft and kind words. And this is what you see from the ulama. The ulama, they give the salams, they come with bashasha, they come with a jovial disposition, they come with hayyak Allah wa bayyak, and may Allah greet you, hayyak Allah, and those soft, kind words, and they mix their speech with all sorts of dua. And they mix their speech with all sorts of dua. And this is the way of the believers. That they speak with good, soft words, and then they make dua for each other. And so he begins with this dua, and this is the way of the teacher and the educator, that they begin with al-kalam al-tayyib, and with pure, beautiful speech, with dua al-salih, and with righteous dua, hatta yu'athira dhalika fihi, so that can have an impact upon the listener. The listener. وَيُقْبِلُ عَلَى مُعَلِّمِهِ. Here we have a combination of 2 things, which are knowledge and mercy. There's a fasl, a very important fa'idah that is mentioned in the book of Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala that is called Al-Fawaid. Al-Fawaid, where he mentions the places in the Quran. He says there's a qa'idah that Al-Hidaayah maqrunatun bil-rahma fi kitabillah kama anna shaqa maqrunun bil-dalala, that guidance and mercy are always mentioned together in the book of Allah. Guidance and mercy are constantly mentioned together in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just as a shaqa is constantly mentioned alongside, misery is constantly mentioned alongside misguidance. So you find this all throughout the Quran, that Allah, when He mentions His huda, when He mentions guidance, which is beneficial knowledge, that He subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions His mercy. And He mentions His mercy. And so knowledge is the key to mercy. Knowledge is the key to mercy. And the people of Islam and the people of Sunnah, they are, as was stated by Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala in his tremendous book Al-Minhaj. His book Al-Minhaj, yani the methodology of the prophetic Sunnah, his book that he wrote against the Rafidah, who make takfir of the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he said, rahimahullah ta'ala, that Ahl Sunnah, that they are upon guidance from their Lord, and they are merciful to the creation. وَلَا يُكَثِّرُونَ مَنْ خَالَفَهُمْ, and they do not make takfir of Muslims who disagree with them. They do not make takfir of Muslims who disagree with them. Meaning in those things that are matters of ta'wilun batil, and of misinterpretation. A misinterpretation where people were fooled and tricked by the shaitan into misinterpreting the religion. They fell into innovation, and that does not remove them from the fold of Islam, but however removes them from being from Ahl Sunnah. It removes them from being from the safe sect, from Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, but does not expel them from the fold of Islam. And here he's talking about how the Rafidah make takfir of those who oppose them, whereas Ahl Sunnah are the most knowledgeable of the creation, he says, and they are the most merciful of them. This is a famous statement of Ibn Taymiyyah. They are the most merciful, they are the most knowledgeable of the creation. And they are the most merciful of the creation. Wherever you have one, you have the other. The more a person truly has of knowledge and understanding of his religion, the more he will have of nush, of goodwill for the creation, and want mercy for them. And he will not want to see anybody misguided, and he will not want to see anybody punished on his behalf. As was stated by the great Imam Muhammad Aman al-Jami rahimahullah ta'ala, that he used to say, when he used to see the ta'unat, when he used to see the slanders that were launched against him by the people of innovation and the grave worshippers and so on and so forth, and the harakiyin and the people who were political agitators in the lands of Islam and were involved in political activism that opposed the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and promoted the way of the Khawarij. He said, rahimahullah ta'ala, that he did not want to see a single Muslim enter the hellfire because of him, meaning because of their abuses of him and their slander of him and so on and so forth, that it weighed heavy on his heart that a person would speak ill of another Muslim, meaning himself, and put their self at risk, because of that. So the people of Sunnah, they are the most knowledgeable of the creation and the most merciful of the creation. And to begin a book in this way is tremendous. I'lam rahimakallah. Have knowledge, may Allah have mercy upon you. Have knowledge, may Allah have mercy upon you. To show that the first and the primary virtue of Islam and of the Muslims is mercy. And that mercy comes as a result of knowledge. And a person cannot truly have mercy upon anyone, their self or anyone else, unless they know the truth and they know right from wrong and they know how to distinguish between right and wrong, so that people can avoid the pitfalls of life and avoid misguidance and so on and so forth. To the point that there is a hadith that is called Al-Hadith Al-Musalsal Bil-Awwaliyah. Al-Hadith Al-Musalsal Bil-Awwaliyah. A hadith that is found in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala, and that is found with Abu Dawood in his Sunan, وَسَكَتَ عَلَيْهِ, and he didn't mention the ruling of the hadith. And as we know that Abu Dawood, when he doesn't mention the ruling of a hadith, as he wrote in another book to some of his students, that when he does not give the ruling of hadith, the hadith عنده صالح, and the hadith صالح للاحتجاج, it is at least hadithun hasan, is at least a hadith that is hasan. and is graded it is collected likewise by At-Tirmidhi in his Jami' on the authority of Abdullah ibn Amr, a hadith that is called Al-Hadith Al-Musalsal Bil-Awwaliyah. Al-Hadith Al-Musalsal Bil-Awwaliyah. Al-Hadith that is Musalsal is a hadith that every narrator of the hadith after the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, or at some point at an early part of the hadith, and he say something similar or do something similar. They say or do something similar. A number of ahadith that are like that. Most ahadith that are musalsal are weak. Most hadith that are musalsal are weak. The sanad itself is weak, although you may find outside of the actual sanad that is musalsal that the hadith is authentic, but those asanid usually are inauthentic. But there is a hadith that is musalsal bil awwaliyah because it begins with saying حدثني فلان وهو أول حديث حدثاني به, that so and so narrated to me from the Prophet ﷺ. So and so narrated to me from his Shaykh, and it was the first hadith that he ever reported to me. And it was the first hadith that he ever reported to me, that his Shaykh reported to him. وهو أول حديث حدثه به, and it is the first hadith that he taught him. Who knows the hadith? الراحمون يرحمهم الرحمن ارحموا من في الأرض يرحمكم من في السماء. Those who are merciful will be shown mercy by the one who is most merciful, Allah. ارحموا من في الأرض يرحمكم من في السماء. Show mercy to those who are on the earth, and the one who is in the heavens, above the heavens, will show mercy to you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so this shows you that the scholars expressed concern and love and care for their students. The fact that the ulama of hadith, at the very first hadith that they would narrate with a chain of narration from themselves to the Prophet ﷺ, will be this hadith, al-hadith al-musalsal bil-awwaliyah. Al-hadith al-musalsal bil-awwaliyah. Almost all of the scholars, when they explain the statement of the author, rahimakallah, they mention the following. Rahimakallah, that when rahmah and maghfirah are mentioned together, that each of them has a specific meaning. That when rahmah and maghfirah are mentioned together, meaning, may Allah have mercy upon you and forgive you, that each of them means something different, but when they are mentioned individually, then they mean each other. If you say, may Allah forgive you, then it's like saying, may Allah have mercy upon you. And if you say, may Allah have mercy upon you, then it's like you're saying at the same time, may Allah forgive you. And there are two things there. When a person says, rahimakallah, is mentioned in the explanation of the vast majority of scholars who explain al-usul al-thalath of the following. You'll find it in the explanation of Shaykh Umar Quinn, explanation of a Shaykh, the first explanation, which was explanation of who? Muhammad ibn Ibrahim al-Shaykh, explanation of Abdul Rahman ibn Qasim, so on and so forth. They say that you have two things, that which has passed and that which is yet to come, that which is present and yet to come. Mercy as applies to that which has passed, meaning may Allah forgive you, lima mada min dhunubik, for that which has preceded of sins. May Allah forgive you for that which has preceded of your sins. The meaning of rahimakallah as relates to the past means may Allah have mercy upon you, meaning may Allah forgive you as relates to your past sins. As concerns your past sins. Concerning your past sins, may Allah forgive you. And as relates to the present and the future, then what it means is وَفَقَقَ اللَّهُ وَسَدَّدَكَ. May Allah give you tawfiq and keep you straight. May Allah give you tawfiq and straighten you and correct you. May Allah guide you. May Allah guide you to righteousness in your statements and your action. May Allah guide you in your understanding and your practice of the religion. May Allah guide you in your understanding and in your practice of the religion. اعلم رحمك الله أنه يجب علينا, that it is mandatory upon us. No, may Allah have mercy upon you, that it is mandatory upon us تعلم أربع مسائل, that we learn 4 masail, that we learn the 4 issues, the 4 issues that are found in Surah Al-Asr. The 4 issues that are found in Surah Al-Asr. Al-Ula, Al-Ilm. The scholars, likewise, when they mention this, almost all of the scholars, they mention the difference between the knowledge that is fardu ayn and the knowledge that is fardu kifaya. When they mention the statement of the author, rahimahullah ta'ala, أنه يجب علينا تعلم, that it is mandatory upon us to learn. They mention that there are 2 types of knowledge. The first is knowledge that is mandatory upon all, and the second is knowledge that is mandatory upon some. And there is a great deal that can be said about it. And the best thing that has been stated about knowledge that is mandatory, when we look at the statements of the author, when we look at the statements of the authors in the ulama of Islam and the books that they wrote about talab al-ilm, about seeking knowledge. There's a lengthy passage, for example, in the book of Ibn Abdul Barr al-Jami', his book al-Jami', Jami' Bayan al-Ilm wa Fadlihi. Likewise, there is a tremendous statement in the book of Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, where he mentions in detail the merits and the virtues of knowledge, that is called Miftah Dar Sa'ada. And he explains that there are 4 things that are mandatory knowledge upon everybody. The first is knowledge of the arkan of Iman, of correct beliefs. A person that they have knowledge of correct beliefs, the aqeedah of Ahl Sunnah, correct beliefs as relates to Allah and the unseen, and the pillars of Iman. Second is knowledge of the mandatory acts of worship as they become mandatory for a person. The mandatory acts of worship as they become mandatory for a person. So when a person reaches the age where they must pray, it is mandatory for them to be taught and for them to learn everything connected to the salah of wudu and tahara and so on and so forth, and how to pray in a manner that is acceptable with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Likewise, when a person starts to gather wealth and they start to earn, they must learn the rulings of zakat. They must learn the ruling of zakat. While a person is flat, busted, broke, it is not mandatory for them to learn the rulings of zakat. But when a person starts to have some savings and that sort of thing, it becomes incumbent upon them to learn the rulings of zakat, when they must pay zakat and the details of that according to their situation. When a person has the means to make hajj, it becomes incumbent upon them to learn how to make hajj. Every Muslim likewise must learn when they reach the age of puberty how to fast in Ramadan. And all of those things are mandatory knowledge, and that can be considered the second category of the 4 categories of mandatory knowledge. The third category of mandatory knowledge is that which is concerning the rights of the creation, the huquq of others, the rights of others. Included in that are the stipulations of a valid business transaction, and the mawani' sihhat al-bay', that which makes the way a person earns or spends their money impermissible. They must learn those things that are connected to earning and spending their money and the rights of other people. And all of those things that are connected to contracts and the rights of people is the third category. All of those things connected to contracts and the rights of people. Meaning, I need the contract of marriage, as that becomes mandatory upon a person. When a person goes to approach marriage, they must learn what makes they must learn what is necessary as relates to the rights of the spouses. As relates to their rights and the rights of their spouse. When a person becomes a parent, he must learn what is mandatory of the rights of children. Included in that are the rights of neighbors. Unless you live in the boondocks and that you don't have any neighbors except for deer and squirrel, right? You must learn the rights of neighbors. You must learn the rights of the neighbors. It's mandatory knowledge to learn the rights of the neighbors, the rights of elders. Unless you are that old where there's nobody older than you, there will always be elders for you, right? And you must learn the rights of elders and the rights of the youngers, right? The rights of elders is mandatory knowledge. So those things that are connected to the rights of other people, the rights of the Muslims, the rights of the non-Muslims, the rights of the Muslims generally, the rights of friends. Friends have special rights, more than just the general Muslims. that are incumbent upon you as a friend and necessary as a friend that you know to fulfill the rights of your friends. And these things are between that which is mandatory and that which is recommended. Between that which is mandatory and that which is recommended. And there is that which is necessary to be just and fair to people. And then al-fadlu fadlun. And then being gracious is extra. Then being gracious is extra, but it's a necessary extra. You don't want people just to give you just your most basic rights and not give you anything other than that, right? Person never gives you wa rahmatullah in the salams, just salam alaikum, right? Said, wa rahmatullah is extra. You got to pay for rahmatullah. I gotta have membership in the club to get rahmatullah wa barakatuh, right? So alhamdulillah, the third category is very important, and many people are negligent in it. The fourth category is knowledge of kaba'ir al-dhunub, ummuhat al-kaba'ir, the most blatant of the major sins. And the most blatant of the major sins is mandatory for people to know, to learn about the major sins. And this is mandatory, necessary knowledge for every Muslim. Mandatory and necessary knowledge for every Muslim. When a person enters into the fold of Islam, they must learn these things, and they must increase in the knowledge of these things. And a person is not excused for remaining ignorant if they did not make an effort to learn. And when we say that a person is excused, ma'adhurun bil jahl, a person is excused for their ignorance, that's not just an open-ended thing. It's not just an open-ended thing. As Shaykh Abdul Rahman al-Muallimi, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said a person is only ma'adhurun bil jahl, he is only excused for his ignorance if he has made ijtihad, if he has made al-juhd, if he has made an effort. If he has made an effort to learn, and despite making an effort to learn, he was mistaken, and he didn't know something, and he acted upon ignorance, at that point he is excused for his ignorance. But if it's something that is mandatory for him to know, or to ask about before he did or said, and he didn't think to ask about it or to learn about it, and he just entered into something that he shouldn't have entered into without learning about it first, and that person is not ma'dhur, that person is not excused. That person is not excused. Let's begin with the first of the four things, and then move into our explanation of the 40 hadith of an-Nawawi after a short break. Al-ilm, al-ula al-ilm, wa huwa ma'rifatullah wa ma'rifatu nabiyhi wa ma'rifatu din al-islami bil-adilla. The first is knowledge, which is to know about Allah, to know about His Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and to know about Islam with its evidences, to know about Islam with proof and evidence. Shaykh Abdul Rahman ibn Qasim, rahimahullah ta'ala, he gives a benefit before entering into those three things. We just mentioned there's mandatory knowledge, and everything outside of what we just mentioned is what is called farudun kifai. It's farudun kifai. It is what is called a communal obligation. If those who are able to learn these things learn, سقط الإثم عن الباقين, then the sin is removed from everyone else. But the knowledge of the religion must be preserved. Knowledge of the religion must be preserved. There are things that are mandatory for some people and not all people. And he would include the knowledge of al-khitaba, of what is necessary for people to give the khutbah and lead the salat, and do the things that are needed by the community and take care of the affairs of the community and represent sisters for marriage and all the other long list of things that are communal obligations. How to call the adhan is a communal obligation. Not everybody has to learn, but somebody needs to know how to call the adhan, right? All of these things are any extra knowledge, and they are mandatory upon some people but not upon all. They are mandatory upon some people but not upon all. And there are many branches of knowledge that are called ulum al-ala. Ulum al-ala, and the tools of knowledge, like usul al-fiqh and al-qawa'id al-fiqhiyya and other subject matters, and the nahw al-sarf, and the deeper learning of the Arabic language. The deeper learning of the Arabic language. Not every Muslim is obligated to learn Arabic with exactitude and meticulously. They don't have to memorize and learn any passages from the Alfiyah of Ibn Malik and these sorts of things. Any Muslim should learn Arabic. And it is mandatory, the scholars, they say, that a person learns enough Arabic to carry out the obligations, like the salat and those sorts of things. You can't be standing talking about Allah is the greatest in the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most gracious, all praises. You can't recite in your salat in English, right? As they do in some of those, you know what type of mashes I'm talking about, right? You know, a person must have enough Arabic to, you know, do what is mandatory in Arabic, to do what is mandatory in Arabic. And it is highly recommended and highly emphasized that people learn Arabic so that they can have a good understanding of their religion. So they can have a good understanding of their religion. And this is from Al-Furud Al-Kifayat. It is from the obligations that are mandatory upon some but not upon all. But there's not a whole lot of us now, is it? So if everybody just keeps passing the ball, everybody just keeps handing the ball over, right? Saying that somebody else is going to take care of this. And this is somebody else's responsibility. And then it may never get done. And knowledge may be lost. And people may, the next generation may emerge as ignoramuses. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. The scholars they mention, as the Shaykh Abdurrahman ibn Qasim mentions here, a number of the scholars they mention when they talk about the difference between the knowledge that is mandatory upon all and mandatory upon some. When they explain Usul Thalatha here, they mention the statement of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala. The statement of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala is like with the statement of Shafi'i and others, that the knowledge that is fardun kifai is muqaddam. It takes precedence over the ibadah that is nafila. Ibadah that is nafila, like nafila prayers and nafila acts of worship, nafila fasting, and this sort of thing. Nafila fasting, nafila prayers, that sort of thing. If a person and he was to give precedence to anything, then they should give precedence to extra knowledge. Knowledge that is fardun kifai, that is mandatory upon some, not mandatory upon all. And to learn knowledge that is not mandatory upon all takes precedence over ibadah that is nafila, at-tatawwu' bil-ibadah. And we know the statement of Abdullah bin Mas'ud, that he said that he didn't used to fast a lot of extra obligatory fasts because it would weaken him from reciting the Quran. It would weaken him from reciting the Quran. And this was the position of the Imams of the Sunnah, to the point that they said it takes precedence over jihad fi sabilillah, that is not the jihad that is wajib, where a person has been conscripted and they have been enlisted in the army by the Muslim ruler, that sort of thing, but volunteering for jihad and seeking knowledge. Seeking knowledge takes precedence over the jihad that is voluntary. Because seeking knowledge itself, so that a person can remove ignorance from themselves and from others, it is jihad fi sabilillah. It is jihad in the path of Allah in and of itself. And it is from the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So knowledge is ma'rifatullah wa ma'rifatu nabiyhi wa ma'rifatu din al-Islam bil adilla. Shaykh Abdurrahman ibn Qasim, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, فَإِنَّ الْعِلْمُ هُوَ الْأَصْلُ وَالْأَسَاسُ. For indeed, knowledge is the foundation of all matters. Knowledge is the foundation. وَأَعْظَمُ الْعِبَادَاتِ. And knowledge is the greatest. Learning and teaching knowledge is the greatest of the acts of worship. وَأَكَدُّ فُرُوضَ الْكِفَايَاتِ. And it is the most important of the communal obligations. بَلْ بِهِ حَيَاةُ الْإِسْلَامُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. Much rather, knowledge is necessary for Islam and the Muslims to live and to thrive. وَالتَّطَوُّعَاتِ إِنَّمَا هِيَ شَيْءٌ مُخْتَصٌ بِصَاحِبِهِ لَا يَتَعَدَّى إِلَى غَيْرِهِ. Whereas the extra obligatory acts of worship is something that is specific to an individual, that is not benefited by, and that others do not benefit by. وَهُوَ الْمِيرَاثُ النَّبَوِي وَنُورُ الْقُلُوبِ. And knowledge of the religion and all of its branches and sciences, it is the inheritance of the Prophet. It is the prophetic inheritance. وَنُورُ الْقُلُوبِ. And it is the light of the hearts. وَأَهْلُهُمْ أَهْلُ اللَّهِ وَحِزْبُهُ. And the people of knowledge, they are Allah's people. And they are the faction and the party of Allah. وَأَوْلَى النَّاسِ بِهِ وَأَقْرَبُهُمْ إِلَيْهِ. And they are the people who are given the most priority by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they are the nearest and dearest of people to Allah. وَأَخْشَاهُمْ لَهُ وَأَرْفَعُهُمْ دَرَجَاتٍ, and they are those who fear Allah the most, and they are the highest of them in level. Shaykh Ibn Baz, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, commenting upon the statement of the author, فَعَلَى الْإِنسَانِ أَنْ يَتَعَلَّمْ وَيَتَصَبَّرْ حَتَّى يَكُونَ عَلَى بَيِّنَةٍ وَيَعْرِفَ دِينَ اللَّهِ الَّذِي خَلَقَ اللَّهُ مِنْ أَجْلِهِ الخلق وهذا العلم وهو معرفة الله ومعرفة نبيه ومعرفة دين الإسلام بالأدلة فهذا أول شيء أن يتصبر العبد من هو ربه إلى آخرها. Shaykh Ibn Baz, he said, it is binding upon the person to learn and to be patient, to force himself, يتصبر, to force himself to be patient, to learn and to force himself to be patient in learning until he has clarity about his religion, until he knows Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who created him, to know him and to worship him. And this knowledge is to know Allah, to know His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and to know Islam with its evidences. This is the first thing. أن يتبصر العبد, that the person, that they are patient, and that the person يتبصر, that they are making an effort to have insight about their religion. Who is their Lord? Who is their Prophet? And what is their religion? We'll continue with Usul Thalatha next week, inshallah ta'ala. If after the lessons, people want to do tasmi', tahfidh, alhamdulillah, we're open for that. Alhamdulillah, we could take some volunteers for that. Barakallahu feekum, inshallah. We'll take a short break, a short recess, 5 minutes or so, and then we'll begin explanation of the 40 hadith.